Thank you, Chair. Good to go.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this morning's Transport and Environment Committee, and a Happy New Year to everybody, and also Happy New Year to anybody watching on live stream, and this is the first meeting of our new year. We are in very strange COVID times, so I'll leave it up to your personal choice. You may well wish to still keep your masks on while you're sitting or while not speaking. I'll leave it up to you as to what you prefer to do. Can I, before we start the agenda proper, could I also refer to former Councillor Maureen Dobson, who sadly lost her fight against cancer just before Christmas. She, I think everybody knows, she was a very forthright person, and she made some substantial contributions to this, to the work of this committee. So I'm sure we all agree she will be very sadly missed, because she did make some valuable contributions. As a member of this committee, I think it's appropriate. Could I ask you, please, could we just stand for a few moments in tribute to Maureen? Thank you very much. So on to the agenda proper, and item 1, the minutes of the meeting held on 17th of November. May I sign those as a true and correct record? All in favour? Anybody against? No, thank you very much. Item 2, apologies for absence.
No apologies received. Everyone's here just to follow on from your words about Councillor Dobson. We are carrying a vacancy at the moment in this committee following her sad passing.
Right, and so that will get resolved through the usual channels, let's put it that way. Okay, lovely. Item 3, declarations of interest by members and officers. Any declosable pecuniary interests from anybody, please? I'll take silence as no. Any private interests, please? That's an... Oh, Councillor Wilmot.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just a little bit concerned, as I said at the meeting yesterday. I've been very...
Sorry, hang on. What meeting yesterday? This is the Transport and Environment Committee.
Yeah, I understand that, but I was at a meeting, the first meeting after the break. And
is this to do with declarations of interest, private interest?
This is all about being here at this present time.
So, are you declaring an interest?
I'm declaring that I'm against face-to-face meetings at the present time, and that you're allowing members, officers to come online, and members have got to be here. And I'm putting a strong word against that situation. That's all.
Right. Well, we, as far as I'm aware, I'm going to ask Agent Smith to respond to that. But my understanding is that we have to be here because government legislation says that we can only make decisions face-to-face. We cannot make decisions remotely. But in tandem with that, staff and officers are being advised to work from home remotely as much as possible. However, I'm going to ask Adrian Smith just to clarify.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So that's a true position. We did have a dispensation and a change in the law during the earlier phases of the pandemic that allowed council meetings such as this to take place remotely. That expired, and as you'll know, council meetings across the country now are all being required to take place face-to-face. I think the provision is that members should be seen and heard in the chamber. But as Councillor Clark says, we've taken steps, therefore, to ask officers to dial in remotely from other locations to reduce the number of people in the chamber. I should add that we've undertaken and updated our risk assessments as well to make sure that we've got the room as ventilated as we can. We've spread members out and indeed, in the absence of officers, spread out further. So we're taking all steps possible, Councillor Wilmot, but we understand as well that this is difficult for a number of members and officers who've got other health conditions. So continue to take all the steps that we can, and indeed, as the Chairman's invited members to continue to wear masks at their personal preference. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hollis?
Yeah, I think just a very brief point on that, and I think to be clear from the independent group, we want to participate and want to be involved, but also members will be aware that sadly a number of our colleagues lost their lives during COVID by putting their civic duties above their personal health, and a number of our county council group, I mean, one of them's in hospital at the minute, and a number of them have long-standing ailments, like Councillor Wilmot. And I just think it's just a real frightening situation. You know, not only do we have a responsibility not to take it back to our communities, you know, we all come from all corners of the county, but taking it then back to the communities and endangering our own health is our worry. But obviously we welcome the fact that officers have been asked to stay at home, frustrated that we aren't afforded legally the same support, but I suppose it's helpful that we can spread out a little bit more, and having the windows open and wearing masks where possible is something we support. But thank you, Chairman, for your words as well regarding masks, and I hope members take it up. Thank you.
Okay, right. Thank you very much. Right, moving on then. So item 4, the Transport and Environment Performance Report. I believe, if I'm correct, it's Derek Higton who is going to be starting us off on this. Morning, Derek. Over to you.
Well, morning, Chairman. Morning, members. I'll just briefly introduce the report, item 4. This is the performance report for all services that fall within the remit of the Transport and Environment Committee for Q2 for 2021-22. And you'll see in both of the appendices that we supply a financial breakdown of financial performance up to period 6 of the financial year. That's in Appendix 2, Appendix B. And in the first appendix, we provide the usual update on our key performance indicators. Both the finance appendix and the performance appendix indicate, within the context of COVID, continuing strong performance overall, both financially and in terms of continuing service delivery. And the report itself provides a little bit more narrative context around both financial matters and service performance and delivery. I'll leave it there, Chairman. Either myself or other colleagues on the call are more than happy to take any questions that members may have. Gary will pick that question up, Chairman.
Over
Good
to
morning.
you.
Good morning. Thank you for the question. So the surveys that we use to measure the road condition that is reported in Appendix A are based on national standards, and they're carried out by third parties. So they're carried out by surveying companies that we employ. And for the A's and B's and C road network, that's based on a machine survey. And so they use lasers to do those surveys. On the unclassified network, it's based on what's called a detailed visual inspection, and it's carried out by accredited third-party surveyors to national standards. So those surveys are consistent across the country and are based on national parameters rather than us using our own inspectors for that work.
Right. Okay. Thanks. Could I ask everybody, perhaps might make it easier to hear people on the screen if you could maybe just turn off your mics when you're not speaking. I think it makes it better for the loudspeakers to transmit then. So, okay. Right. Thanks for that. Councillor Gowland.
Thank you. I just want to start by supporting what the Independent said at the beginning of the meeting. I know it's nothing to do with this county, but it's a shocking situation nationally, the vacuum of leadership, where we've got officers on the screens, we're in this room, and we're choosing whether or not we protect each other with masks. But anyhow, on this document, can I ask whether in future we could consider the total amount of waste produced in the county, because the county should be trying to reduce the amount of waste, not just work out, what fraction of it goes to one place or another. And also, can we, again, please list incineration on this list of destinations for rubbish, because just saying that it's diverted from landfill is not really the whole story. And finally, given the large projected underspends in this, relatively large projected underspends in this area, I wonder if some of it could be directed towards waste reduction in the county, as well as how we deal with what waste we have. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. Yes, interesting what you say actually about waste reduction, because I completely agree with you in terms we need to be promoting reduction of waste in the first place, and that's an ongoing message that we need to keep pushing out. So I don't know if Derek, do you have any other comments in response to those comments?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for the question, Councillor Gowland. Yes, we're currently in the context of the new council plan that was approved by full council back in November. We're pulling together a revised set of key performance indicators for all priorities for the council for April of this year onwards, and revised environmental performance indicators will form part of that suite, and will therefore be able to take into account your comments around incineration and total waste, because within the context of our environment strategy, which the committee is of course familiar with, we'll also be seeking to take steps to do exactly what you're suggesting, to reduce the council's overall generation of waste. So I anticipate that we will be able to report on that in the future. As far as the overall budget position is concerned, obviously underspends within the remit of this committee are part of corporate activity to manage the overall size of the council's spend and manage our overall budget. But given that the environment and carbon reduction, as you'll know from the agenda papers this morning, is one of the key priorities for the council going forward, I'm sure it's the case that we'll be looking to ensure that we place appropriate financial priority on environmental and carbon reduction matters in the future.
Okay, all right, thanks for that. Councillor Wilmot.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Just a couple of questions to the officers. On this paper, it says waste is forecasting to overspend by 556,000, and the retained client is forecasting an overspend of 237,000. Knowing full well that most of that work is done by Viola or VIA, they do most of our work in this paper. I just wonder who's responsible for that overspend, who would be paying for it. Would we be asking Viola for some of that money or not? And also, it says that you're after cutting the road users killed or seriously injured by 40%. I'm hoping that really ought to be 100%, because we don't want anyone to die, surely. I'd just like to get a reassurance on those issues.
Yeah, I'm sure we all agree with our sentiment would be that we would hope that it could be 100%. Unfortunately, I think we're sort of dealing with human nature and reality, which is not always easy to achieve that utopia, but certainly it would be great. Our ambition should be zero injuries, never mind about zero deaths, but it's difficult, isn't it? A part of that overspend, it says in the report, it refers to the costs relating to the booking system that was introduced on the West Bridgeford site, which has now been ceased. Derek, any other response, comments to that?
Thanks, Chairman. I'll ask Mick to pick up on the Veolia-related question from Councillor Wilmot, and Gary to pick up on the VIA elements of that as well. Thank you.
So, Mick Allen, yes, please. Mick.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Thank you for the question. Thank you very much, Derek. Yeah, the retained client costs actually don't relate to the Veolia contract. Where there are overspends related to the retained client, that's in effect recycling credits that we pay through to the district councils for materials that don't go through the Veolia contract. So where there is some significant additional cost this year, mainly related to glass, the combination of homeworking, etc., plus successful Euro competition for the English football team and some of the other home nations, has resulted in some significant additional tonnages of material that have come through the curbside. So the 200,000 is mainly related to payments that have been made to the districts for statutory recycling credits. Obviously, there are some additional costs associated with the recycling centres, etc., that Derek's mentioned, but they are Veolia costs. But generally, the waste-related costs are linked to tonnage. So if tonnages of waste go up, then clearly there are additional processing costs. It isn't profit for the contractor; it's just the cost of dealing with the material that's running through the service, unfortunately. And that has increased substantially as a result of COVID over the last 18 months now.
Thank you for that. I think, Councillor Wilmot, am I correct? Maybe I'm doing a disservice, I don't know. Was it a slip of the tongue? You did mention VIA at one stage, but I think you were referring to Veolia, I think, weren't you? Yeah, sure. Lovely. Okay. Right, thanks for that. Any other comments, questions? No, it has been moved and seconded. All in favour, please? That is unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. Right, on to item 5, the Corporate Environment Strategy and Greenhouse Emissions report. And could I ask Mick Allen to come back on, please? Present the report. Thank you.
I will do. Thank you very much, Chairman. This report brings together an update on the Corporate Environment Strategy and some of the actions that have been taking place over the last 18 months or so. I'll not run through the report in any great detail. There's 3 appendices in there that are useful for members to refer to. One is around the action plan. Generally, Appendix A, that's showing good progress on most areas, except for 1 or 2, 3 maybe areas where it's been affected by COVID specifically. Appendix B is the greenhouse gas report. That relates to 1920, the previous year when we didn't have COVID impacts. So that's setting a baseline. The modelling for that and the arrangements for doing that greenhouse gas report are based around local partnerships and LGA model. So it's relatively consistent in how it's applied. It shows overall CO2 equivalents of around 16,800 tonnes for Nottinghamshire for 1920. That will have decreased since then because obviously LED lighting, which makes up much of that, will deliver some significant savings, because if you look at the figures and the graphs that are in the appendices itself, you'll see that highway lighting was one of the key areas of electricity for that, and that's obviously slowly increasing as reducing in effect as the LED lighting is rolled out. It also obviously doesn't take account of the switch to green electricity, which will happen from 22-23 and was approved at the EDM committee a few weeks ago. There are a couple of things there just probably worth mentioning. That schools transport, where it's commissioned externally, isn't included in the greenhouse gas report at this point in time, but the intention is to capture that going forward. That's really because of the way that it is commissioned. We don't have the detailed figures that are would be available to us where it's directly operated, but works are underway with colleagues in highways side of things, the transport side of things, to capture that information. Appendix C specifically covers the spend on the Green Investment Fund. There's around £500,000 of that been allocated, and obviously we're intending to spend that on projects that deliver the best environmental and carbon savings for us. And obviously we're also hoping to secure some additional money into the next financial year and beyond to continue with that programme of works. There are a couple of general updates within that. Reference to the national strategy has been released around net zero and the heat and building strategy, which will obviously set a new and refreshed and obviously more stringent policy framework for us to work to around our environmental performance going forward, and hopefully will give us some more funding opportunities as that progresses. And then finally, probably worth just mentioning that there's reference there to the COP26 conference, both the international event that happened up in Scotland, but also the local event that Councillor Adams fronted with economic development colleagues. There's also mentioned in the report here around the resources for additional resources to support the delivery of net zero, but that's in the follow-up report, so obviously we'll cover that in a little bit more detail later. So there you go, we're around to answer questions as appropriate. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, and yeah, this does represent addressing, as we all know, in May we declare that climate emergency, and this is all part and parcel of our work to address that and to contribute to reducing our carbon emissions, which is incredibly important. I will move the 3 recommendations on page 23, recommendations 1, 2 and 3. Seconder, Councillor Adams.
Yeah, formally second, Chairman. Thank you.
Do you wish to speak now?
Yes, I'll speak now.
Or hold your peace?
I'll speak now, please.
Carry on.
Thank you. Yeah, so thanks for that fantastic introduction, Mick. I think it's really good to see this here. The greenhouse gas report forms the cornerstone of all of our plans moving forward, and I think it's given us that understanding of exactly where we are, which was, my big concern from when we started was, if you don't know where you are, you don't know where you're going, and you sure will find it difficult to know how to get there. So I think that we've got this information, albeit as Mick's pointed out, missing currently the transport figures, but obviously we know that will be coming in the near term. I think as well, what's been really, really positive is that we're already making moves on this. The report itself, as you can see, as you look into the detail of the things that we've done so far, the tree projects that are in process at the moment. I had the pleasure of planting the first oak tree at the Blydydd site as part of the planting scheme not so long ago with the Greenwood Trust, who are the ones that are involved with the actual overall project, and watch the the speed of the actual professionals doing it. I mean, we had a big shiny spade and everything, but they just went off at speed. I didn't realise you could plant trees that fast. It doesn't take, even my own garden, it takes me significantly longer than that, but those guys were quite formidable, and thousands were in the ground in no time at all. And I know that project's looking to be finished very shortly, and I think that counts for some 17,000 trees in the first phase. So, again, things are already in progress and working on these. Mick's mentioned the LED lighting, which has helped us. We've got our fantastic new transfer over to the renewable tariff, which will also immediately offset a significant amount of those emissions through the fact that we'll be sourcing them directly from renewable sources. Moving on as well, there's lots of stuff coming up around how we're going to improve the biodiversity, because for me, the net zero challenge is not just about how we deal with emissions and how we go about ensuring that our emissions outgoing are hopefully one day less than our incoming, and the things that we can actually generate. I mean, that would be the ultimate dream. Although we haven't had that conversation yet, so I might save that for a later date. You know, it's also important that we are improving the environments that people live in, the environments that people spend time in when they're outside of their house. You know, when they're walking around the countryside, and but also key to that, around their own areas. You know, I think it's very simple to go sometimes to a green site and plant a lot more trees, but the real challenges we face, and the real challenge we've got to grab hold of, is how we improve that green view in streets, terraced streets where it's difficult, and we need to find our ways to overcome that. And I'm very excited about working towards resolving those challenges also. So yeah, I mean, again, how we move forward and how we improve things like the air quality, obviously, as we take on more green powered vehicles, whether that be battery or hopefully hydrogen will begin to take hold, and how we introduce those into the mix of our transport as well, again, is another massive leap forward, and again will improve air quality, because I think sometimes, again, focusing on purely the way that the energy is generated, you know, we've got to also look at how we're improving the air quality locally to residential areas as well. And things like electric buses remove the idling requirement outside of schools, for example, or outside, you know, any bus stop location. The idling disappears, and again, we're then faced with cleaner air in those localities, improving where people live. And if there's one thing we need to make sure we're doing, is we're improving where people live. So very much welcome this report. Thanks ever so much for all the hard work that's gone into getting it here, and look forward to making, as I've said many times before, net zero happen by 2030. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Hollis.
Thank you. Certainly welcome those comments. And obviously, in May 2021, we welcomed the Council's declaration of climate change emergency, and indeed have backed all steps taken since. It's clear that we're singing from the same hymn sheet in calling for urgent action on climate change, except that is members of the Conservative Pension Fund Committee who refuse to divest from companies involved in fossil fuel extraction. Will the Chairman, and maybe Councillor Adams, of this committee like to distance himself from recent comments made by Ashfield MP Lee Anderson, who stated on GB News that we should increase fossil fuel extraction, intensify fracking options, without being able to state that what savings this would create of residents in Nottinghamshire. He further stated that people in the county don't care about climate change. Does the Chairman feel that having a desperate dinosaur like Lee Anderson on his team is undermining the cross-party effort of this authority to do their bit to combat climate change? Thank you.
Thank you. Well, as I stated at the beginning, I'm very keen to do that the Council does all it possibly can to support the declaration of the climate emergency, and this goes a long way towards helping to address that. So I'm quite happy that this Council is doing, striving to do all it can. It all costs a lot of money, but it's money that we need to invest to basically help save our planet. So this is a big step in the right direction. Councillor Guilfoyle.
Thank you. Like you, we support this fully and welcome it. And it's just a start. You know, at the end of the day, this is just a start. It's got the needs assessment. We need to work from that. Just an issue for me, because I believe we've got a wider responsibility of the County Council. This is about what we will do sort of internally, and for me, it's about what we will do externally as well. And I just wondered about the work that we'll do with other partners, because it's not really mentioned within it. I think that's an important part. And also about the work with the voluntary sector as well. We've got the staff to a degree. We're going to get some more staff, but we've got the staff to be able to do the audits, to have a look at all that. There are smaller businesses and voluntary sector organisations that need to do the same as what we're doing to enable their little bit to go to it, but they haven't got the wherewithal to enable them to do that. And I just wondered, linking, as it does within the report, it links the proposals for the staffing. And just wondering whether, that resource can also be looked at giving assistance to other outside bodies, including the voluntary sector, relating to this, because they also have an impact. And as I said, they'll not be able to have either the wherewithal possibly to be able to do that. And I think this is an important thing that we could push through. Also, clearly, we've declared an emergency, and it's just like the comparison of the emergency. If you look at what we're spending on comms, as opposed to this new unit, we're spending more on comms than what we are on this new unit. Yet here we are declaring a climate emergency. I believe they've appointed 4 new staff in the comms, apparently to get the leader's face known. I think that was the argument used when the decision was made. My view is that this is a lot more important than just getting, the leader's face known. So I want to say, have we really assessed the need in the sense of the staffing structure to be able to deal with the issues that we face? And I think also, perhaps some of the staff could be used to educate, as Councillor Orris says, some of the dinosaurs that we have out there. Perhaps, probably if they have 5 minutes sat down with Lee Anderson and just educate him a little bit about some of the consequences of fracking, etc., perhaps that will help him in his decision-making process. But clearly, we fully support this. We just think that, A, have we got adequate resources to do it? And B, that wider responsibility where we can help, people out there, what we're doing about that.
Thank you very much for that. Clearly, we could always be spending a lot more money on things, couldn't we? We have to make sure we do budget our resources responsibly. I don't want to drift too much into the next item, which is the staffing structure, which does impact on that. But you're quite right. In terms of these other organisations, let's collaborate wherever we can. Let's share information. Let's share experiences wherever we can. And if we can help act as an enabler, it's difficult possibly for us to actually get involved directly in some other organisations, of the organisations that you've been talking about, but there's no reason why we shouldn't, where possible, enable and help and support in some way. I think it's a question of horses for courses, and it will depend on who the organisation is as to what is appropriate. But certainly for me, it's all about everybody working together in some shape or form to reduce those emissions that we are striving to reduce. Councillor Adams, I think did you have some further response?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, and thanks for your points. I think you're spot on with that. And I think the key thing for us is that we are showing how this should be delivered and setting I hate to say an example because I don't think that's the right word, but I think to show that the different ways that businesses, because businesses are all different, councils are quite unique in the fact they have so many arms, I think, and deal with so many, have their hands in so many pies, if you like. But businesses are sometimes very unique. So I think what's absolutely right is that we look for a whole solution like we are, and we're trying to deal with all of the problems that, and all the ways that we're mitigating carbon. And the businesses then can involve themselves and look at the different things we've done. And we already are reaching out to businesses. In fact, they're reaching out to us too. you know, some of the difficult challenges that businesses face, especially the ones that are looking at renewable energy, they have to be sited in specific places to be able to get the energy in and the energy out in the right way, for example. So key messages around that are identifying and helping them to do that. The volunteer organisations as well, yeah, I mean, spot on, and you know, I'd put that out to them now if we're reaching out to them, but also if any of them want to reach out to us and say, you know, we'd like to do something, please let us know. I think there's a case for businesses as well to get involved with some of the tree planting. They can, you know, there's no reason why they couldn't come forward and sponsor some areas of trees that we're going to plant and be involved in that way and be able to offset some of their carbon emissions through some of the new sites that we're creating. We've got an opportunity with a lot of the new sites that we are going to be opening for tree planting, and we're trying to obviously obtain as well, to facilitate that for businesses and take them on our journey as well. And I think also another side of it as well is around trees. I've talked about trees and greenery on streets that are you know, terrace streets where it's difficult to locate them. I think it's really important that we really home in on that, and again give businesses opportunities to take advantage of that too, but also that we think slightly outside of the box. So if let's say for example that we want to plant a highway tree, is it feasible that we could actually grow that highway tree, you know, and along those lines? How are we thinking about how can we not only improve the environment for people but also improve our costs also? So I think all of that together, all of what you've said, absolutely. And further training is available for anybody that would like it on environmental policies and information. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Gowland.
Thank you. I'm really pleased to hear Councillor Adams' answer to the last question. I wondered if you'd also considered linking up with other big organisations in the area that might be doing some similar work to sort of share resources and share expertise. I'm thinking of the universities and the NHS particularly, but there will be others. I wondered whether I'm also really pleased to see that the procurement supply chain is now taking account of the environmental impact beyond the council. I wondered if the training could include for staff of environmental impacts at work could include working from home, because we heard earlier about how working from home has increased waste, and clearly it has shuffled the energy consumption from this building to everybody's houses. And whilst there are benefits from not travelling, there must be disbenefits in terms of heating houses, particularly on a day like today. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Turner.
Councillor Guildford, you mentioned third sector organisations, and I'd like to say that the LIS scheme, the County Council's LIS scheme, is a great way of supporting third sector organisations. Going back 4 years, I have personal experience of this, where a business I worked for converted their whole lighting system LED to LEDs via this scheme.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a question on Action 22 in the Appendix A. Refers to working with schools to support and advise them on opportunities to achieve net zero. I wonder what this includes different to the school improvement grant that maintained schools get. Particularly, I think there was over 20 odd projects this year that got government funding for more energy efficient windows and boilers and solar panels and stuff, which is great. And academies receive that grant directly from the DFE to improve their schools in a more energy efficient way. So I wonder, what are we trying to achieve in Action 22? I welcome it, of course, but what are we trying to achieve that's different to what's already there? And of that, my second question is, have you come across more interaction or different interaction between maintained and academy schools on what you are trying to achieve?
Mick, are you able to help us with that?
Yep, I'll come back quickly on that one. We obviously currently run a local authority loan scheme, in effect, through Salix Finance. There are some changes coming to that, central government changes that's going to impact on it. But we use that grant to provide interest-free loans to maintain schools, to support additional energy efficiency measures over and above some of the things that schools might be able to fund direct themselves. It is very similar in terms of the work that the central government is doing to fund academies. We can't use our money for academies, in effect, is what it is. So they are complementary schemes, generally similar types of projects: LED lighting, improved efficiency boilers, moving away from fossil fuel boilers, etc., those sort of things. But it does work along those same lines. And colleagues in the energy and carbon team currently also work with schools around, they produce a termly newsletter to provide the schools with best practice advice around saving energy, about moving to greener technologies, etc. And some of that work is hopefully going to grow as we go forward. It's probably worth just mentioning as well, as part of that wider debate that's just been happening, obviously we work very closely with our colleagues in the economic development and growth side of things. So Jo Davis and her team, they do a lot of work with businesses and with third sector partners around training and around opportunities for greening business work. So there'll be a lot of interface there between the work that we're doing around internal improvements to our business practices, and actually that link into the external world. And they worked in with ourselves on developing that COP26 add-on conference, etc., locally. So there is a lot of stuff around that already happening across the council, in this case of coordinating that in an effective way.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Wilmot.
Thank you, Chairman. Looking at the all the pages that I've been looking at, I acknowledge that some of the progress has been made on the corporate environment strategy, and agree that the greenhouse gas report is measuring towards the future targets of the carbon neutral targets. But I just want to ask the officers, do they feel that we are on course to achieve a 68% cut in emissions by 2030? And of course, we'll be achieving the net zero nationally by 2050. Because having a look at the Appendix A, of the 60-odd projects that are on it, at the present time there's only 2 complete. And in fact, there are a number with no progress at all. I just wonder what the officers thought of the whole project.
Are you able to answer that, Mick?
What I can say is that obviously we are now clearer on what our baseline position is, which I think is what Councillor Adams was saying. Without knowing what that baseline is, it's very difficult to focus the effort and the resources into meeting the key elements of our carbon emissions. I think we're in a very good place now compared to where we might have been. As you say, we've declared that climate emergency. We have an aspiration to reach net zero by 2030. I think it's a challenge. I think it's a challenge for the UK overall to reach 2050. But I think with the renewed enthusiasm and the commitment that the administration is currently making, the resources hopefully that are going to come into helping to deliver that, and certainly the national commitments that are being made at the moment, I think we're in a stronger position than we possibly could be to make that move. I can't give you a guarantee, because at this stage, who knows what tomorrow will bring, let alone the next 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years. But we're in as good a place as we could be, I think.
Okay, thank you for that. I don't think there are any more comments, so it's been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please. That's unanimous. Thank you. So, very much related or overlapping onto the next item, item 6, is the staffing proposals to support the delivery of the net zero intention, and the report starts off by referring again to the Declaration of Climate Emergency. Mick, would you like to introduce or Have you any further comment to make? What's in the report?
Oh, well, I think probably not a lot, actually. I think it's very self-contained. This very obvious. We need some additional resource at staff level in order to deliver on those aspirations. I think, in principle, agreement has been reached now to provide £200,000 to support additional resources into next financial year. We've put together that draft structure, which will fit within that £200,000 resource allocation, subject to that going through committee in full council in February, budget setting, and we'd ask for your support in moving to this new structure, which does a bit of a shuffle around of some of the existing resources, but also brings in 4 new posts to help deliver on those aspirations.
Thank you. Yes, and it basically demonstrates another factor in the investing in trying to reduce emissions, and as you've already indicated, some of the posts have already been appointed. The Environment Strategy Manager appointed, I think, was it last September or October time, and some have to be appointed, but it's important that we have the staff in place to deliver our ambitions. So I will move the recommendation at the top of page 44 to approve the structure. Seconder, please.
Formally second, Chairman, and reserve the right to speak.
Thank you very much indeed. Any Councillor Gowland and Councillor Wilmot?
Obviously, this is an extremely welcomed proposal. We were rather disturbed by the other options considered, which was doing nothing is not an option, because that doesn't seem particularly imaginative, as we've already kind of covered some of these issues, but we note the amount of money being spent on comms and consider that that's probably, you know, given the climate emergency that we all agree about in this room, we wonder whether the sort of balance between comms and the climate or climate biodiversity is appropriate. i.e., are we spending too much on comms and raising the profile of the leadership, as was raised in that previous meeting on staffing? And secondly, doing nothing is not an option. Again, there are other options, as we've discussed. For instance, building teams with other organisations, big employers locally, so we don't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel across the county, where other people in the area doing similar things might be able to share some of the load. So it seems a little strange that this is the only option proposed and that there aren't alternative, at least in terms of budgets, available. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, what I would say is that do nothing is always an option in any consideration of any proposals, and if we didn't include that as an option, then actually I think you can't say that you've fully considered all options, because as I say, do nothing is always an option in every walk of life. Councillor Wilmot.
Thank you very much, Chairman. With regards to the recruitment crisis facing councils like Nottinghamshire, how confident are we that we will be able to attract the right candidates to take up these roles? I note that this council only had a small expression of interest for the recently advertised post of Service Director for Transformation and Change. Yet in meeting after meeting, it seems this council wants to employ more and more people. You're on a recruitment drive akin to the one oil-rich Newcastle United are about to go on. Should we not be looking at existing staff and making sure every decision we make looks at the environmental implications anyway? Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for that. Well, I'm going to bring Mick in a second, but certainly from my assessment of the situation, my understanding is that not all the posts have yet been advertised, so we don't know what the response is, and I'm quite confident that those vacancies would be available for anybody internally is also able to apply to those posts. It's not going to be limited to outside people. Therefore, it's an open market where we need to attract the best possible candidates, whoever they are. Mick, anything to add at all?
I think it's worth saying that obviously our HR processes will require us to go through job evaluation to assess what the gradings are for those jobs, but also we will advertise internally before we go to any external recruitment as well. So internal staff would have the first option on applying for those posts, and if they're suitably qualified and appropriately skilled, then they'll be in a good position to get those jobs. I think it's also worth saying that this is a real interesting and exciting area for a lot of people, and I think working within an area of trying to get to net zero will give us a very good pool of people interested in applying for those posts. I think it's worth just referencing back as well from Councillor Wilmot's comment that obviously in the previous report that does reference the fact that the environment and sustainability comments within reports are already there, and we'll be seeking, one of the key things we'll be doing is making sure that people are appropriately completing that section of a report template at the point that they're making decisions, because I think it's really important that we embed all environmental considerations within decision making across the organisation, so it will be captured. And yes, certainly in terms of recruitment, it is a challenge at the moment, recruitment, but I think these jobs are going to be of interest to many people, and certainly many people who are already within the organisation, hopefully across our graduate cohort, people within the projects team, etc., etc. We know that people want to be involved in environmental improvement work, and it puts us in a good place, I think.
Thank you for that. And as I said before, this demonstrates the Council's investment in people delivering the addressing of climate emergency and of reducing our emissions. So I think, as Mick's just illustrated, these are incredibly important and exciting new posts. Councillor Hollis.
Thank you, Chair. I think we all want to achieve the same aim, but I really fundamentally disagree with the way we're going at it. We're at a situation where councils are tight for money. We only have to look to our neighbour in the city council, who are making drastic cuts and laying off staff with immediate effect to balance their books. We're at a point where the staff simply aren't there, and when you're advertising jobs like the service director and we get one applicant, it's a tough thing, and also I think, not to educate the Conservative group on a famous American phrase, but we want the most bang for our buck, and I really don't think employing more people at a time where our finances are tight is the most prudent thing to do. And not only is it financially irresponsible, but secondly, I don't think it achieves what we want to achieve. I want every staff member and the HR code to be rewritten to make sure every staff member has a responsibility to achieving net zero, not just an extra few employees. Everything from, Mr. Smith at the top of the tree, whether he's using a certain cup or whatever it might be, down to the carers who maybe can car share. Whatever it might be, from every level of the organisation, people need to be thinking about their efforts to get us environmentally friendly and achieving net zero. I don't particularly see how employing these extra staff, and the report certainly doesn't put my mind at ease to actually what are these people going to do to the thousands of services we run and the thousands of employees that we employ. I'd have preferred to probably have a bit more of a financially prudent and more effective method of achieving this. My own feeling, Mr. Chairman, is I think the Conservative group feels that if we just chuck a bit of money at something, then we can say we've done it. We can replace the cups in the other room to permanent ones, but then the other stuff we do, like the pension fund, which, yes, is separate, but is run by us directly, go completely the wrong way. So let's start seeing some tangible efforts. And I think we can agree that the conclusion is the same, and we agree, but the independent group certainly feel that there's better ways and more cost-effective ways of achieving what we want to achieve. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Well, just a couple of responses there. I'll repeat what I think I've probably said at least twice now, is this is investment in addressing the climate change, and it shows an investment, and it shows that we are keen to attract people who will be doing a very important job to reduce emissions. It's not going to be something where you just sit there doing nothing. These staff will be busy finding ways to ensure that our emissions are reduced. And I'll refer you very quickly back to the previous item, which is relevant, where we talked about every report and every activity throughout the whole council will require a sustainability report. So it's not a question of just having these half a dozen members of staff doing it. The whole culture and ethos will be that every activity within the council will need to consider climate change sustainability, and they need to be, and there will be a standard item in each committee which addresses this. So I think that this structure is going a long way.
Role, 8 of which were highly recommended. We gave technical interviews to 6 candidates, and members chose from those 6 candidates a shortlist and ultimately appointed. So I just wanted to clarify, I think actually Nottinghamshire County Council has a good reputation in the recruitment market and is seen as a desirable place to work. So hopefully we can have some confidence about recruiting some talented people to join our team.
Thank you. Councillor Barney.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I wasn't intending to speak on this, but just felt I want to make a couple of comments. Still, I claim to be a newly elected member, having only been elected last May, and I think that that's probably wearing thin, and I probably need some of my political decisions to stick to me at this point. But in regards to climate change, one thing I think I have realised in the last 6 months is that politics at a local level with climate change gets in the way. I know in my own heart, I know in my own thinking, that I am committed to, for the benefit of my children and for their futures, to see us all work together to do all we can to stand against this disaster which is ensuing this planet. And as such, I encourage us all to get behind where we see measures like this, to get behind. I also appreciate from the conversations that are happening internally within the Conservative group that there is a lack of resource in this area, and that officers do require more resource if we are serious about implementing and meeting these targets. We are talking about the stepping away from our dependence on fossil fuels to these huge tree planting schemes, to all of these measures across the county. This does take resource, this does take human effort, and we need more staff to facilitate that. And as such, I'm delighted to support this recommendation for more support to our officers. Just on in terms of meeting those challenges, fossil fuels and the whole fossil fuel debate, it's a huge argument, and it's not one that I really want to attach myself to. But I would just throw in a comment that I actually work in the green hydrogen industry, and I know that this country and countries around the world face a huge bottleneck in green hydrogen supply. And one of the only ways that we're actually going to meet that supply demand is by the oil majors diversifying away from their existing technologies and helping meet that supply demand. They have the technologies, they have the capabilities to help us to do that. The likes of Cadent Gas in this country are leading the world in helping to achieve that. So I absolutely agree with you. I don't want to be digging up more fossil fuels out of the ground. I don't want to be getting into fracking. But the oil majors do have a role to play in this arena. They have the infrastructure, they have the people, they have the intellectual capability. And I just wanted to say that on the back of some of the comments which are floating around in this chamber. Thank you.
Right, thank you. So it's been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please. Ooh. Sorry, you reserve the right to speak, Councillor Adams. What would you like to say?
I'll make it quick, Chairman. Just a couple of things. I just want to address the comms point, because I think what's being wholeheartedly not picked up with the comms point is they're the ones that have been out recording the videos about the buses that we've been talking about with regards to renewable energy. They've been seeking the radio interest and continued it past COP26. They also had a heavy involvement with the regional, which was mentioned in the last item, the regional COP26 that we did from the workshop turbine, and again they were fundamental in ensuring that got out to the right places as well. There's been the discussions about the STEP nuclear programme again, which again is we are at the front and we are fighting to get that in Nottinghamshire. They've been out there ensuring that we get the television interviews that we need to make sure that's being discussed and people understand what's coming. Comms is absolutely fundamental to what we do as far as the green message is concerned. We can do as much as we possibly want to ourselves, keep it to ourselves, not tell the world. And we will not inspire the businesses that Councillor Guilfoyle talks about, or the organisations that Councillor Gowland talks about. We have to be visual, we have to be visible, and people have to hear us and understand the reasoning why we're doing this and why we are spending this money. Because, you know, Councillor Hollis is right, money is tight. We have to spend money in the right ways. But I welcome the fact we're investing money in jobs and ramping up our support for our colleagues who have existing responsibilities already outside of this climate emergency that we've given them as an extra role, and they need that support. They can't be out there working 120-hour weeks in order to enable without getting the equivalent pay and assistance to do that. We have to support our colleagues. If we want a gold standard in net zero action, we cannot do it with copper grade investment. However, the road to green doesn't always have to cost the earth. And we've already seen already with many ways that we've been doing promotions as far as how to save energy, how to reduce your costs, and how to do things in your home that can help you afford to heat your homes well as boil your kettles to have your cups of tea. This is an incredibly exciting opportunity, and I agree with Mick and also with Neil around the excitement around climate at the moment and the fact that it is a growing industry. Councillor Barney points out the key connection with hydrogen and how we've got to enthuse people, and it's our responsibilities as local representatives to get out there and enthuse people. That's our job. It's not always down to an administration to dictate to people how and when things happen and the interest in them. We are all responsible for doing that. And finally, on Councillor Wilmot's point, you know, we're not after Ronaldo. We're after Greenaldo, and if we can find him, we will absolutely do our damnedest to get him. Thank you very much.
Good, thank you. On that note, as I started to say, it has been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Those against? 2. That's carried. Thank you. Item 7. Recycling centre strategic review. I'll ask Mick to come in. It's still you. You still have the stage.
Apologies, yes, it's me again. It is my last item, so hopefully a bit of relief shortly for everyone. This report proposes undertaking a strategic review of our recycling centre provision across the county. Members will be aware, obviously, that the Environment Act and Resource and Waste Strategy is likely to bring forward some significant changes to curbside collections from the district councils over the next 18 months to 2 years. We think the time is right to review our existing 12 recycling centre provision, particularly in light of that legislation, but also particularly growth in housing across large parts of the county, and obviously some of the lessons learned from COVID over the last 18 months, nearly 2 years now. As I said, we've got 12 sites at the moment. The city have 1. That provides a good geographic coverage in a lot of areas across the county, but what it has highlighted, particularly around the last 18 months to 2 years, that some of those sites are difficult to access, and particularly when queues are developed, they create highway related issues as well. I think it's really important that we undertake this piece of work at this point in time while curbside changes are likely to occur. It allows us to better assess whether the network we have is fit for purpose going forward. It'll allow us to consider investments and opportunities to change or improve those services to meet future needs. The intention is to try and work with the city where possible, because obviously, as I say, they do only have 1 site. The city have made positive sounding noises about being part of the study, but obviously they have other priorities, as members have alluded to earlier in the meeting as well. If we can involve the city in this piece of work, we will. But obviously, that'd be great in terms of a wider devolution discussion and a public service provision. But we recognise that they may not be in a position to do that. The idea is to have the piece of work done over the next 3 or 4 months, with the intention of trying to report back to committee on the potential opportunities for improvement before the summer recess, depending on the availability of resources from the external world who'll be carrying out that work. So we'd like to be doing this relatively quickly, getting on into the new financial year. So we look for your support in carrying out this piece of work. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed for that. And yes, this will be important because we do need to ensure that we have up-to-date facilities and trying to provide us the most efficient facilities as we are able to in order to help promote recycling, but at the same time, it's sort of a bit of a contradiction maybe. We need to be promoting recycling, but also promoting reduction of waste as well. So it's one of those very difficult balancing acts, I think, to achieve. But it's something that we do need to be doing. It is time that we did review all our recycling centres to make sure that we are providing the best possible service in the light of changing circumstances around the county, around the country and around the world. So I will move the recommendations at the bottom of page 49 and the top of page 50. So that's recommendations 1 and 2. Do I have a seconder?
Formally second and reserve the right to speak. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Hollis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I can honestly say I'm flabbergasted that this council is committed to spending £50,000 of taxpayers' money when it is the responsibility of Veolia who carry out the waste PFI contract on behalf of this council. We've all known for a long time that there are operational issues with many of our 12 recycling centres in Nottinghamshire, as this report states. It talks about the problems in Beeston, Mansfield, West Bridgford in particular. In paragraph 7 of the report, it states several sites are operating at capacity and many experience operational difficulties due to where they are located, generating complaints from residents. Is it me, Mr. Chairman, or is this council teeing up to close some of our valued recycling centres? Are we about to spend £50,000 to close some of our recycling centres, obviously seen and described in this report as a pain to this council? And I think going back to some of the maybe less experienced members in this, feasibility studies tend to mean let's look at trying and close something. That's 10 years of experience for you there, councillors. Also, can I raise concerns expressed by popular independent councillor Francis Purdue-Horan? As you know, Councillor Purdue-Horan has been campaigning for a new recycling centre near Cockgrave. He says this is a missed opportunity for the council to keep an historic promise made as far back as 2017 to residents. The council have repeatedly stated that the process has been made, but this is clearly not true. They've not even put in the planning application. Francis is concerned that any proposals for a new recycling centre is not even mentioned in this report. The much anticipated recycling centre near Cockgrave in Rushcliffe was promised in the Conservative manifesto in 2017. They repeated the promise in the elections in 2021. The Communities in Place committee approved it on the 1st of October 2020. That a promise for a new household recycling centre in Rushcliffe near Cockgrave be progressed forwards to a formal plan application. Over 15 months further on, there has been no such planning application has been submitted, with no news on its current status. The same could be said of plans to improve the recycling centres in North Nottinghamshire. In 2018, the council carried out a feasibility study into reopening the old council tip in Huthwaite, in my division. Whilst this feasibility study concluded that it's not possible, it also accepted the need for better recycling provision in Ashfield and Mansfield areas. No mention of this either. Mr. Chairman, can I have an assurance that all recycling centres will remain in their current locations, and we will look to use the review to finally keep a promise made to the residents in both Rushcliffe and West Bridgford to provide them with a new recycling centre? Thank you.
Thank you. Well, before I bring Mick in, I'll certainly make a response to that. And you quoted paragraph 7 and experiencing operational difficulties. So I wouldn't guarantee that everything stays in their same location, because it may be as a result of a strategic review, and I emphasise may be, that it's better to have another facility somewhere else, and maybe even in a bigger one, because you cited Rushcliffe, which I happen to know extremely well. The Westbridge site is very constrained. Maybe, I emphasise the word again, a review might say, well, let's have a bigger site, not about closing any sites. So I'm not aware of any proposals to close any sites at present. I think it's more about providing better facilities within the existing sites so that operationally they are not going to be having the problems that create complaints from residents at the moment, and it will be great. There were never any complaints from anybody. That's utopia, obviously. But to me, this is a way of ensuring that we make the facilities better. I don't envisage a situation of closing. I think it's making things better. Mick, do you wish to make any response?
I think I'd absolutely agree with you there, Chairman. I think this is about reviewing what we've got, taking into account all of the issues that we're fully aware of around potential changes to curbside operations, changes to extended producer responsibility, which is going to impart new requirements on manufacturers and retailers to deal with particular waste streams in a different way. The likelihood is that the type and range of materials that are received at the recycling centres will change over the next 2 or 3 years, and I think that allows us the opportunity to properly review. It isn't about it absolutely isn't about reducing the provision. It's about making sure that provision is fit for the future, and how that is structured and how that eventually manifests itself needs to be looked at in the round with all of those potential changes. And I think it's really important that we do that rather than continue to try and put sticking plasters over some of the issues that we know have been an operational issue for a long time. It's also worth just mentioning, obviously, Councillor Hollis mentioned around Veolia. Veolia operate the sites that we provide for them. They are ours. Veolia don't provide those sites. So the constraints, some of the constraints that Veolia operate are constraints that we've had for the last 30 or 40 years because of the sites that have been grown up over a lengthy period of time. So whilst they do the best to operate in some areas and in some circumstances, yeah, some of those problems that we've created for them, and they would be there with any operator. It isn't just down to Veolia, and there are long-standing issues that we have now the opportunity to resolve, hopefully.
Thank you for that. And I'll repeat, I think I've probably mentioned it on a couple of items previously. This is this difficult balancing act. I'm anxious to promote and increase recycling to strive towards actually having no sort of general waste, if at all possible. But obviously that's counteracted by the fact that we want to reduce the amount of waste that's produced in the first place. So it's those very sort of difficult, that very difficult balancing act. Very briefly.
Yeah, briefly. I'll park the comments because I accept those answers and we'll be watching them. But the only other very small supplementary, I wasn't sure if it was relevant, was, I'm sure you're aware, Mr. Chairman, I know Mick will be, we subcontract the recycling centres to Veolia. Veolia have then subcontracted many of them to other people who have then subcontracted them again. And I've raised concerns with this with Mr. Smith, but I don't know if we can incorporate this in part of the review. I was actually subjected to some homophobic abuse about a year or two back at one of the centres, the one at Kirkby in Ashfield. And I said I want to report this to the site manager. I was told that he not only was the site manager who did it, but he was the leaseholder who'd been subcontracted by a subcontractor of Veolia. He was wearing a Nottinghamshire County Council logo, badged up with Nottinghamshire County Council stuff. And I'm seriously concerned that when something gets subcontracted once, but then again and again, that we lose, how can I say, ownership of the staff and responsibility. And particularly if people are going to be wearing our logos on these things, I think it'd be helpful if we could maybe incorporate this as part of the review as well. I mean, we should make a demand that Veolia don't subcontract it. If they want the job to run the centres, they should do the job. So that's just maybe a slight sub point to it. Thank you.
Well, I don't know if that's historical. I believe it was investigated, but Mick, obviously I don't want to get this. It's an individual incident, which it's probably not appropriate to be
No, Mr.
discussed
Chairman,
in public. But do you have a response, Mick?
It was investigated, and Councillor Ollis is aware of the outcome of that. Clearly, if subcontracting is an effective, cost-effective, and operationally effective way of delivering that service, then obviously we have to look at that, and if that is the best way to deliver it and the most cost-effective way of doing it, we'll continue to do that. I think it's appropriate that people wear either Veolia clothing or Notts County Council clothing, depending upon the service that they're providing. But we do expect, obviously, all of those contractors, subcontractors of subcontractors to behave in an appropriate way and follow county council policy, and we will ensure that happens where we can, and obviously where investigations are required, they'll be undertaken. If the outcome is satisfactory for unsatisfactory for Councillor Hollis, then obviously he knows that was the opportunity was there to continue that debate with Veolia.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Smith and Councillor Wilmot.
Oh, sorry, it's all right, it doesn't matter, it's fine. I'll go last, it's fine. It doesn't matter.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. Welcome this review, and I just wonder, one of the biggest things in my intro, and I'm sure in other councillors, is fly tipping, and I think we can, as a council, I know fly tipping and clear up is a district responsibility, but actually the county council can play into that and sometimes inadvertently encourage it by some of the rules around access to our recycling centres, particularly for those who may drive bigger vehicles, as a family truck, for example, or white van men and the trade people. And I wonder if I'd be interested to see whether the cost of clear up of all those fly tipping is greater than the cost of actually allowing them into our recycling centres. And maybe in this review we can do a comparison with authorities that do allow commercial waste against those who don't, such as ourselves. And I suppose my question is, do we as a county council set those rules of access to our recycling centres, or is that a Veolia responsibility? And if it is our responsibility, will that be reviewed? Secondly, if I may, is about carbon footprint. Our county borders a lot of the city, particularly if you live on the outskirts of Mapley Plains in Gedling, you're on the skirts of Gedling or the city, and I think the county, I may be wrong on this, but I think we have a rule that only county residents can access our recycling centres. So if you live on Mapley Plains, which is in an NG3 or 5 postcode, your closest recycling centre is Kelverton, but you have to drive all the way to Lenton. So inadvertently, we are adding to the carbon footprint of city residents by not allowing them into our centres. So if the Veolia set those rules, fair enough, but if we set them, can we review them, please?
Right, thank you for that. I think, it's very difficult. In terms of fly tipping, then, as you've already said yourself, it is sort of comes within the realms of the district authorities. But perhaps, Mick, I don't know, is that something, it might be in with the strategic review, maybe we could look at the policies relating to recycling centres, and I think the question was, is that Veolia who decides it, or is it the county council who decides it?
No, absolutely not. They're county council policies. So the county council sets the policy and Veolia applies that. The report references some of the work that was done previously with regard to cross-border use of the recycling centres, and the calculation was that Nottinghamshire residents were subsidising residents from out of county and sometimes inside the county in the donut to the tune of over £1 million a year by waste disposal costs that were being met by Nottinghamshire County Council for waste that wasn't generated within the Nottinghamshire area. So some of those policies are designed to manage that, but a lot of them are also designed to manage trade waste, because obviously waste is a very highly regulated area, and contractors use the term white van man, but contractors legitimately carrying out work for householders, house clearances, etc., shouldn't be using the recycling centres. That is commercial waste, and they should be charging appropriate fees for doing that. I think it is an interesting point around the cost of clear up of fly tipping, and we're part of the fly tipping group, the Cleaner Knots group, that's managed by the district councils, and I think Ashfield are currently chairing that, which obviously looks at fly tipping across the county. But there's been a lot of work nationally done around how waste recycling centre policies impact on fly tipping, and I think it's very clear from that actually it doesn't impact quite as much as people might think, because fly tipping is generally undertaken by people who have a vested interest in fly tipping, i.e. they're trying to avoid legitimate costs that should be falling on their businesses. So having a policy that restricts access to vehicle types doesn't necessarily create additional fly tipping. I appreciate it may be inconvenient for certain types, and I know Councillor Adams has been subject to this himself in the past, but it is there. It is designed to try and mitigate the risks of unscrupulous traders using the sites to offset some of their legitimate business costs and making those costs fall upon the taxpayer. But there has been quite a lot of work done nationally around that, but we can absolutely capture it within this piece of work. But I think the evidence says that HWRC policies aren't necessarily the key driver in terms of fly tipping outputs and outcomes.
Okay, thank you for that. My apologies, Councillor Barney. I forgot to put you on my list, but if I just bring you in after Councillor Wilmot. Councillor Wilmot.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Paragraph 16 of this report talks of extensive housing growth across Nottinghamshire. It states that although Waste Management seeks financial contributions from housing developments through developer contributions via Section 106 agreements, very little funding has historically been forthcoming, and no improved or additional recycling centres have been developed to cater for such growth. Do you see this as a comprehensive failure from this council, as we allow developers to build and not improve our infrastructure? Is this the result of having an arm's length organisation dealing with our waste and leaving council to pick up the pieces with increases in fly tipping? Fly tipping again. Councils like Ashfield have had to be more creative to deal with issues created by these failures, with better enforcement and ideas like the big Ashfield Spring Clean and other projects. And as we come on to fly tipping, because there's been a number of people talking about fly tipping, I wonder if we could put into the review a possibility that small vans and small trade waste be allowed on these recycling centres for a small fee, because it does seem that that would stop a lot of the problems of fly tipping. And I'm saying that because people talk to me about the whole situation and saying that that would help. I'm sure it would, and it's not just a few people. It's all over. People talking about it. And even small businesses say, why can't we go to these recycling centres? We don't mind paying a fee as long as we get the rubbish moved. Because if they go to the biggest centres, it's more of a problem for them, because the cost of delivering it to these centres, and these small builders are living from hand to mouth, a lot of them. So, Chairman, I just wondered if that's a possibility to be put into the review.
Thank you. Well, I think the policy relating to vehicles entering the recycling centres, I think that is can be part and parcel of the review, because we are want to have a comprehensive strategic review of the recycling centres, so it should make sense that the policies relating to the centres access should be included as well. So is that
yeah, that's fine, Chairman. I think it's fair to say from our side that we're in the process of, have for a while been developing a proposal out at Newark for the waste transfer station next to the recycling centre to take small traders at a small fee. That's ready to launch and has been delayed through COVID over the last sort of 12 months or so now. In the Ashfield-Mansfield area, though, Mansfield District Council operate their own trade waste centre there within their depot and are able to take small traders at a small fee already. So there are opportunities for people to do it, but people don't do it. The other thing just worth coming back on, I think, is around Section 106 monies particularly, because generally they're allocated by or sourced by the district councils, not by the county council. So although the county council can ask for money to support a new recycling centre, the district council would then have to build that into any Section 106 agreement with developers. So whilst we can ask, it isn't necessarily within our gift to make that to get that money out of the developers. It's very much a planning authority function, which generally falls to the borough and district councils.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something that can investigate sort of the legal implications of, you know, what is possible in asking for contributions such as that. So that's something that could be looked at to see if it is physically possible to do it. Councillor Barney.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I was really sorry to hear of Councillor Hollis's problems at his local tip, because I wanted to put on record in West Bridgeford and in Rushcliffe, and I don't know whether the other members would agree, but our local tip is really, really well run, and the staff are absolutely incredible. And before you'd made your comments, I actually wanted to just thank them. If we cast our minds back to the end of the first lockdown, the chaos that ensued, I don't know about all the tips in Nottinghamshire, but in West Bridgeford, from all the people who cleared out their attics and garages and lofts and wanted to all arrive on the same day at the local refuge dump, it was quite something. And I just wanted to say, in all weathers, those guys are there on the ground, managing those centres. The West Bridgeford one, as I say, from my perspective, and also from those that I speak to locally, it's a really, really well-run and efficient tip. And the staff that operate there always have a smile. They're extremely helpful. So shout out for the West Bridgeford refuge tip staff down on the ground there. But my point was, and you did touch on it in your comment, I live in Sutton Bonington. I've lived there most of my life, right down in the south of the county. And for most of my life, we were able to access the local refuge tip in the neighbouring district of Charnwood at Shepshed, and also the local refuge centre at Loughborough. So obviously the cost of that waste was being taken into account under the taxpayers of Leicestershire for, as I say, most of my life. When that was removed, it has resulted in all of the villages in the southern part of the county having to take their waste and refuge to the centre at West Bridgeford, which is a journey of about 15 miles as opposed to 2 miles to our local centre, which obviously has implications on the environment, and I suspect also has implications on fly tipping, although not too greatly, I'm thankful to say, in the villages of South Nottinghamshire. So I just wondered whether the review could look again. It looks like the council have looked at this thoroughly in the past. You're saying that there's a net cost to the council of £1 million in taking refuge from other districts, but actually, of course, the reverse is true. Other districts are taking that cost as well. And I just wonder if we could look at that in some way again for Leicestershire, Lincolnshire, Yorkshire and Derbyshire, because I'm sure that it's not just true of the fringe villages of the south of the county. I suspect that's the case. Up in the north, I can see how the distance on the map I'm looking at here is also considerable. It looks like it might be 20, 30 miles if you're out in the North Council to your local refuge tip. Can this investigation look at that again? Thank you.
Mick, any
Yeah, absolutely. We can reopen that conversation. I think one of the things that's probably worth saying is that Nottinghamshire has substantially better provision of both the number of recycling centres, but also the opening hours than most of our neighbours. So whilst absolutely there are flows backwards and forwards across those borders, there are always going to be, aren't there, on waste, because there are always sites that are more local. My local site where I live is actually probably Kirkby, I guess, but I travel to Bolsover because I'm in the Derbyshire side of the border. So I do the same as Councillor Barney really in that. But absolutely there are opportunities to have those discussions, there are opportunities to share. You know, we have been there before, but we're more than happy to reopen that debate and approach our neighbouring colleagues, and we've actually got a meeting with a number of them on Friday about food waste collections and the opportunities that presents, so we can use that as an opportunity to open that discussion as well around recycling centres again in advance of that study. So we're happy to do that.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Guilfoyle.
Yes, Chairman, my initial question was going to be asked on what is the time scale for the review. I've had a look through and I can't see a sort of an end date, and I'm just conscious it can be a very contentious issue, as you've heard today on some of the discussions that members have had, and obviously we're changing to a cabinet system. That could mean that it could be that the decision is left to you alone. It could be you could take it to cabinet. Or it could be, if it's done alone, it's about, we haven't got the new systems up and running yet on how those, so it's about how we will have the ability to have an input onto the review at a future date. Whereas if it's done prior to May, then there's a potential that this committee may have an input and may help the decision process. Just on the other issues, I think it would be interesting if Councillor Wilmot went back to Ashfield and looked at the 106 applications that they've done and how many at Ashfield planning applications have included a bit for waste. Because I've heard, many a times when it's come back and the issue is really a district issue, not a county issue, and we do ask. It's just that the planners don't see it as a key issue for the district. So it would be interesting, as I say, if Councillor Wilmot could go back and say, right, let's look through the last year's planning applications that have come in and how many have included a contribution towards the waste strategy for the county. The other one is about trade waste. Clearly, many, I know it's difficult for small businesses out there, but they should be including within the costs when they do the works an amount for the disposal of the goods. Good businesses, good and small businesses, because they can charge the people that they're doing the work for legitimately, and that should be within the costings. So, the argument about, well, it's a burden for them and all this, yeah, they might have to travel a few more miles because we haven't got enough sites around that take trade waste, but that's something I think, we should look at.
Yeah, thanks for that. And that's perfectly legitimate that we should look at all these aspects as part of the review. If we're going to do a review, let's do a review properly. In terms of the timescale, I'll just refer you to paragraph 34 at the bottom of page 48. It does talk about anticipate it. And it used the word anticipated, so that's not a set in tablets of stone 3 months, but I appreciate that's going to come directly up against a potential, or put it this way, the debate for a cabinet system at full council. So I can't obviously prejudge or predict exactly what will happen, but like all these things, they'll have to be dealt with depending on what circumstances come up. So the review may well come back to a committee, or it may well come back to a cabinet situation, depending on when the decisions are actually made. But yeah, you're quite right to highlight it, and at the moment we can't say for sure exactly how the timescale is going to fit in, but that is the intended timescale as it stands at the moment. Mick, anything to add to that?
No, I think the reality is it's likely to be a 3-month piece of work. I think we'll complete the brief over the next couple of weeks. So you're absolutely right. It'll be in that sort of period when the changeover happens, if it does. So we'll obviously have to deal with that and manage that through the appropriate process. But Councillor Guilfoyle's points around trade waste, etc., are perfectly legitimate, and absolutely we'll capture those within the piece of work that we do.
Yep. Okay. Thank you, Councillor Garland.
Thank you. So, first of all, as everybody said, to get rid of this waste efficiently, we need to make it as easy as possible for people to get to the recycling centres and they need to be close to their houses, otherwise we've got a kind of contradictory situation where we're wasting petrol driving to a recycling centre. I'm shocked by this map. I didn't know it until today or until I read these papers. You know, if you take these white boxes off, there's nothing over here. It's the whole of the southeast of the county and up in the north. Bingham, you know, talk about Cotgrave. Bingham is a huge town now. No recycling there. What? So I really welcome the chance to even this out across the county and make it more efficient. And things like allowing small traders to use these recycling facilities and allowing cross-border waste disposal just all sounds sensible. But going beyond that, can we look a bit more at the glass recycling facilities? Because, you know, I'm personally never going to drive to a recycling centre with my box of foil, but we can't put the foil in the bins, so we collect the foil at home until, you know, we have a load of stuff to take. But why can't we have foil recycling bins where we have the glass recycling bins and other small wastes like that, so people don't even have to go to the recycling centres? Finally, I have had, not recently, but in the last few months, people contacting me who use cargo bikes and want to be able to get their cargo bike into the West Bridgford Recycling Centre. People who know the West Bridgford Recycling Centre will know it can be quite hairy to be there in a car. So can we make sure that these recycling centres are actually accessible by people who don't want to drive, people who are on foot, because in West Bridgford that can be the case, and people who are on bikes. And finally, I'd like to agree with Councillor Barney. The staff at these sites are the frontline key workers in the environmental battle we're fighting, and it would be good if the comms team could promote their work and promote their input. But I wonder if it's possible to link up with groups, because the staff are often very good at pulling out stuff that can be reused. And I wonder if it would be possible to link up with groups like Free Cycle and similar organisations that actually encourage reuse across the internet to actually get some of this stuff out of the recycling centres and back into people's homes when it's usable. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, yes, I'm aware that in the centres they certainly do engage with some other organisations in recycling, whether the particular ones that you quoted, I'm not so sure. But Mick, do you have any comment at all?
Yeah, just a couple of things there, I guess. Certainly, a number of our district councils already promote organisations such as furniture reuse projects, etc. So link those into obviously the customers out there, so that stuff doesn't get to the recycling centre in the first place. Because if something's perfectly good and reusable, then it should be reused. Obviously, that would be the ideal scenario. In terms of bring bank provision, curbside provision, obviously that's a district council function, so not something we can influence. Obviously we work with our colleagues at the districts, but if there are opportunities for them to introduce additional bring provision or glass recycling services, we'll obviously be more than happy to talk to them about that and what the business case for that might be. But the resource and waste strategy will deliver some of that anyway over the next 18 months or so. And certainly in terms of non-car users access to the recycling centres, we can provide that, but we do that by appointment only at the moment through customer services, and for the very reason that you highlighted, Councillor Gowland, around the fact that some of the sites are very congested and it's quite a difficult environment for pedestrians and or cyclists to access. So we do provide that, but we do it by appointment to make sure that there's no conflict with the users.
Okay. Thanks for that. Councillor Ogle, last speaker. Could you put your microphone on, please, because it won't be transmitted to the outside world.
Thank you, Chairman. I thank Councillor Gowland for a concern in the rural north regarding the spaces between the sites. Happily, there's a site at Gainsborough that used to be very efficient, so it'll be useful to get some feedback from myself. It'll save me having to write a personal request to any of the officers if that is included, which I'm sure it will be. So I'll leave it at that, Chairman, and support mostly what's been said for the review.
Right, okay, thank you. And so the two recommendations have been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please. That's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. So now we come on to this very short report on item 8, the Joint Waste Local Plan. And so without further... there we go. Yes, we're on the screen. I believe, Sally Gill, I think, are you introducing this initially?
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Yes, I'm going to introduce it, and then I've got my colleague Steve Pointer to answer the detailed technical questions. And as members are aware, we are a waste planning authority, and as part of that responsibility, we have to prepare an up-to-date waste local plan for Nottinghamshire. And this local plan is prepared jointly with the City Council, so it's a waste local plan for Nottinghamshire and Nottingham City. We, in 2020, we carried out an issues and options consultation, and we've put details of that in the report. And since then, officers from the two authorities have been working on preparing the draft document, which is before you in your papers, and hopefully you've all spent the Christmas break reading it, because it really is an exciting read. And the purpose of the paper this morning is to seek your approval to go out to a consultation period, so we can invite comments from yourselves, your communities, your parish councils, waste industry, and anybody else who wishes to comment or bring ideas or thoughts to us on the plan. And if I can draw your attention to paragraph 8 in the papers, this sets out the key things the plan is trying to achieve, and very much following on from the discussions we've already had at committee this morning. We want to support wider waste initiatives to ensure waste is seen as a resource to be reused, recycled and then recovered. But we do, at the end of that, there is always a need to have some disposal facilities. And we want to make sure we're planning for waste in a sustainable way. And obviously that echoes the discussion we've had earlier about net zero. And we need to have a robust planning framework, setting out how we're going to deal with planning applications for waste development, which will underpin the work of the Planning and Rights of Way Committee of this authority. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. So the recommendations 1, 2 and 3 as set out at the bottom of page 56, I will move those recommendations. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Adams. Okay, thank you very much indeed, Councillor Ogle. Any questions, Councillor Hollis?
Thank you, yeah, and thank you, Sally and Stephen, for the report as well. But just before I touch on it, I think kind of linked with the last report, I mean, they're so intertwined, but and just going back to some of the points that were made about with going cross-border, let's not forget, I mean, Councillor Ogle would remember this discussion. We're the ones that stopped that when Labour were running the council. I believe it was supported by the Conservatives at the time. We wanted to issue a ticketing system, and then we got it scaled back to issuing a login system, so people had to register their cars to stop people from the city and other counties using ours. However, then that stops us using theirs as a bit of a tit for tat, whereas it's like school places. You know, I went to school in Derbyshire because I lived on the border, and we take as many kids as we give them. It's just balanced the same with the waste. So it's worth remembering the history of these things, and obviously it links into this report as well. And largely, I agree with many of the points we've made, but having a brief scan, I think, like all of us, of the 200-page document, I was a little bit concerned by NCC and NCC being a net importer of waste. So members will be aware in paragraph 7, it states that approximately 1.4 million tonnes of waste originating from outside of the plan area is being imported into waste management facilities located in the plan area, Nottingham City and Nottinghamshire, equivalent to 38% of total waste managed by the facilities in the plan area. With approximately 670,000 tonnes of waste originating from the plan being exported, this means that we are an importer of 730 tonnes of waste not generated by local people. I mean, if somebody could explain the reason for this, what are we doing to try and mitigate this, and what are the financial consequences of not getting to grips by being a destination for other people's waste? And do we feel it's fair to be dealing with such significant amount of additional waste? Thank you, Chairman.
Steve, I don't know, do you have any response to that?
Chair, yes, hope you can hear me. That is a figure which is the product of, it's come from Environment Agency data, covering not just household waste, but commercial industrial waste as well. It's a figure that basically proves that we are, yes, a net importer. There's more waste processed in the county than is generated. But actually, I want to stress that waste is a commercial product, and it is very much part of the economy. So in the report, we mention a concept called the circular economy, and waste is now a product to be used and reused. And I'm very encouraged, actually, that there are many businesses now based in Nottinghamshire which are processing waste, using it, and it is having an Environment Agency licence, but it is being used productively. So we do have to watch this because, as we've discussed, cross-boundary flows, in the future, we may well need some of our landfill provision to be met outside the county because we don't have capacity in. Now, this is, we will have to rely on other authorities to cooperate with us to make sure that is happening in the future. But it is good to have this particular figure up our sleeves, because ultimately, in total flows, we are currently processing more waste than we produce, which is just a matter of economics, I think. It's just the fact that there are more waste operations facilities in the county.
Thank you for that, Steve. Thank you very much. Any further comments? No, as per usual, it's always the biggest item that receives the least debates. It's always the case. Right, so the three recommendations on page 56 have been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please. That's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Sorry, right, item 9, the Active Travel Fund, the Tranche 2 Infrastructure Programme, which deals with Dovecote Lane. And I think we've got on the screen now Gary and Paul Hillier. Gary Wood, are you starting things off?
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Yeah, if I start things off, and if there's any detailed questions, then
can I just stop you a second? Could you just shout up a little bit, or just get a bit nearer to the microphone? We can only just hear you.
Apologies, Councillor Clark. Is that better?
That's fine. Thank you.
Yeah. So Paul Hillier is with us in case there are any detailed questions, because Paul's worked on this report and this scheme. So just to keep it brief, the purpose of the report is to seek committee's approval around the experimental order on Dovecote Lane. It's part of our Active Travel Fund work and part of the bid that we put into government. We put the scheme out to consultation originally, and there were some concerns in the community, and we've listened to those and are now recommending a revised scheme. And as part of the revised scheme, we're recommending an experimental order which will run for a maximum of 18 months should it be approved. And during that period, obviously, if things go wrong or there are issues, we have the ability to remove the scheme, and we'll take feedback from residents during the scheme. So the recommendations are on page 193 of the agenda pack.
Thank you for that, and a nice link there. It's the recommendation, which is just a single recommendation at the bottom of page 193. I will move that recommendation, and Councillor Ogle, I'm looking for a seconder.
Second, Chairman, we reserve the right to speak.
Thank you. Now, I did indicate, Councillor Fole, the local divisional member, did request that she could speak, and I did say that she could come along and hopefully make just some brief comments, I hope.
Yes, thank you. And I appreciate that. Thank you for letting me speak, Jay. Yeah, I mean, to say this has been going on a while is, is kind of an under-exaggeration. It's been going on ever since I've been a councillor. And I just must thank Paul, because his creativity, his patience, and his work on trying to solve the problem of what's going on Dovecote Lane has been absolutely exemplary. So thanks for that. And what I'm about to say isn't any kind of criticism of what's going on at this council. I just wanted to say that too. But what concerns me about this was when the original proposal was put forward, it got a massive response. One of the biggest, I think, as I understand, that the council has ever seen. Over 450 people kind of responded to this, and this really is dividing the community on Dovecote. We have very strong people in favour of traffic calming measures and very strong people against, and that's oversimplifying what is actually a really kind of complex situation. So I just wanted to make that point first. My serious concern with this is that now what's happened is it's moved to, as you say, an experimental stage, which is, I kind of get that, I understand that, but without any further consultation. And again, I understand that the logic behind that is that we're going to actually try something else out that sounds reasonable on the basis of the consultation, on the basis of what's happened in the past, and then to consult as a result of that. Now, I did, and I have made this point, and again, this isn't criticising any officer. There were a number of people that said they would like to be kept informed further in terms of the progress of this. I've got one or two names on the list. I suggested that actually we got in touch with those and consulted with those before this was put forward, because now people are saying, well, actually, as you can imagine, my email box is full of this. What's going on, Kate? Why isn't this progressing? So I think it would have been better to have done a further consultation with those people who responded to the original consultation, said they would like to be kept informed. And I think the fact that didn't happen, I think is a real shame. And if you look at paragraph 12, you'll see that I've made that point kind of very clearly. And thank you for reflecting that in the report. My big concern over this too is that what is happening here, and again we see this time and time again with funding for schemes like this, we are trying to match the criteria to get the funding instead of the other way around. And this kind of very ring-fence funding that seems to continue, whereby the central government is saying to us, this is what we want you to do, rather than saying, what is it you need in your area to make this work better? If the second had happened, I think we'd be in a completely different and much better place. I think the timescales are impacting on this as well. I mean, one of the reasons, quite reasonably, why they were saying, well, we couldn't go to further consultation is because of the timescale. It's got to be done by March. Well, why? Why can't we just get it right? This is really what frustrates me over this one. So I suppose to say to this is, okay, fair enough. I can see the logic behind wanting to try this out, because the problems down Dovecote have been going on for years and years and years. I do understand that. But if there's going to be a consultation at some stage, I'm told 700 letters are going out about this. 700 letters are going out to consult members. And I really do wonder if this had been done more from a kind of a bottom-up, from a top-down perspective, as I've just described, we would end up in a completely different place. But I understand the difficulties with that, and that's where we are. But please, can the consultation be real? That's really what I'm asking. I would really like to know better. What I've said to officers all along the line, I don't know what the answer is. You're the highways experts. The residents are actually having to live with this. I will support whatever the residents want. And so I really want to see proper, purposeful consultation on this one. I mean, one of the things that has been suggested to me, all kinds of things have been suggested, different routes, different ways of doing traffic calming. I think there's kind of neighbourhood calming schemes that could be considered. Could these things continually be considered as the consultation carries on to see if there is a better option, which is actually quite a brutal option of kind of completely blocking a road off, which is a main road into Beeston. And I understand the need for cycling, I understand the need for active travel, I understand all that. But I'm really wondering if this is the best option we can come up with. Okay, so I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Folt. In fact, you may be surprised to know that many decades ago, I did actually live only a few roads away from the top of Dovecote Lane. So I do actually know the junction very well, although I did go last week just to remind myself, and I saw a surprising amount of traffic turning into that junction. What I'll bring in Gary Wood and maybe Paul Hillier, because my understanding is that the things that you've highlighted, that's why it's on a temporary or experimental basis for 18 months, and there'll be constant monitoring of that, and so therefore it's sort of de facto, if you like, an ongoing consultation rather than a specific sort of focus consultation. So that's my understanding, but before I get myself into deep water, I'll bring Paul Hillier in just to clarify where we are in terms of experiments and consultation.
Sorry, Gary, did you want to pick that one up?
Oh, sorry.
I'm happy to pick it up, Paul, and by all means, add to the answer. I think just in terms of the comments on the consultation, it will be a genuine consultation and it will be an ongoing consultation. But I do recognise all the points that Councillor Fole has made, and we do feed back to the Department for Transport in terms of the criteria that they give us around these schemes and whether they give us more freedom and also the deadlines as well. And certainly one of the things that we're potentially looking at around devolution is to have those greater freedoms from the DFT to operate in a better way. Again, I recognise that there's lots of opinion locally about it, and in the end, to bring it to a conclusion, other than perhaps doing nothing, we thought the experimental order was the best way forward, and ideally would have had the chance to do some more consultation, but then we would have run out of time and not been able to use the money. So I think what we've put in front of the committee is really the best that officers can do with the framework and the construct in front of us.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Hollis, then Councillor Gowland.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Kate, for your thoughts as well. And I think in paragraph 10 of the report, it talks about the ongoing uncertainty around future traffic levels post-COVID, which means that it's not been possible within the delivery timescales to carry out a definitive study of the possible impact of road closure and congestion and delays on neighbouring road networks. So basically, you're asking us to vote on a scheme when we don't know the impact on neighbouring roads. In the report, it states the person who knows the area best, the local councillor, Kate Fole, is in favour of deferring this for future consultation, and the independent group back these calls. Experience shows that after a scheme like this is introduced, councils very rarely U-turn. And we've seen an action like this in a recent planning application done by this council on Sudbury Drive, where we couldn't get it through the committee, so we did a temporary change. But why would we spend tens and tens of thousands of pounds doing the house up, tens of thousands of pounds introducing this order, to then go back on it 18 months, 2 years later, however long it might be? And then I'd also like to point out, a rushed decision is never good. I mean, I think we can all think about it in the personal lives where we've rushed to doing something and it didn't turn out to be a great idea. But let's give a highways example. So in the village I represent of Huthwaite, we rushed to do hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of changing completely the road network, one-way streets, big humps, and it's led to more problems than originally were there. We've had cut-throughs going back down back roads, we've had accidents, we've had uncertainty, all sorts of things, because it's a very bizarre road network, and I see this happening here. Yes, you might solve the issue on the main road, but we have no idea, and the report states it in paragraph 10, what the implications will be, because we've been able to do no studies because of the COVID situation. So I join Councillor Fole and others in writing to the government and asking for an extension in the time frame to complete this work from March 22 until we consult all residents to find out what they want and better understand the impact. And of course, we don't want to lose this funding, so let's write to the government and in good faith ask them to extend it. And I think we have very good reasons to do so. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for that. Councillor Gowland.
Thank you. First of all, clearly, again, we're in the position where the government set us a ridiculous system that we're having to operate within, but we are where we are. We do need to act to get some of these local area transport plans through to change the way that we are moving around our towns. That does mean that this scheme does need to be joined up with the bus network so that people have an alternative. So it's not just a case of moving cars around, we actually move people out of cars and onto buses and bikes. But most importantly, it was suggested that we should ask the council to look at automatic number plate recognition software, so this can become a soft cut to the road rather than a hard cut to the road, to allow local residents to still use it, to avoid the situation where people end up doing more road miles to actually get around than less, but to stop it being used as a rat run. So can I specifically ask that during the 18 months, automatic number plate recognition is considered as a way to soft cut this road to make it residents only allowed to drive down it. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know, Gary, any response to that?
It's certainly something we could look at, but that type of arrangement does require a significant amount of administration, not only to set it up in the first place, the technology exists, but also to keep it live. And sometimes we can end up putting something in where you do your best to sign it, but people ignore it, and then we end up, issuing penalty charge notices. But it's certainly something we can explore as part of the process.
Right, thank you for that. And I have no problem at all with the suggestion. We can write, I'm happy to write to the government to ask for an extension in parallel with this. I think this experiment should go ahead and the consultation take place and other options be looked at and either discarded or taken further, one or another, while it goes on. So I think this sort of ongoing monitoring and ongoing consultation is something that we ought to be doing. Councillor Ogle.
Yes, Chairman. We've looked into this because the concerns were raised by the member, and we've looked into it in more detail than sometimes occurs. And it appears that item 10 has been raised, and there are parking bays.
Councillor Ogle, we're not on item 10 yet. We're still on item 9.
Oh, right.
I mean, they both relate to Dovecote Lane, so that's probably where the confusion has occurred. But
Sorry, yeah.
They're both opposite ends of Dovecote Lane, the very top end and the very bottom end.
Yes, I understand people have been discussing the entry to it, I understand.
Yeah, right. Okay, right, if there are no further comments, it has been moved and seconded, and I'm happy to include us writing to the government to ask for an extension due to COVID circumstances, but still to go ahead with this scheme, but to emphasise, and I'm pretty certain that the officers have taken on board very much a detailed monitoring and ongoing consultation, and taken on board things as they progress through the experiment. So it has been moved and seconded. All those
were you making that a formal resolution or just a commitment?
I think it's not actually going to be, I don't think, written into the it's just something that we'll do. But I don't mind from a procedural point of view. Does somebody, Councillor Ogle, would you second the fact that I'm writing to the government?
Yes, I'd formally second that, Chairman. And
Right.
I'll make sure you do it.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So it has been re-moved and re-seconded. All those in favour, please. 8 in favour. Those against? Abstentions? 2 abstentions. Thank you for that. Right, item 10 relates to the very southern end of Dovecote Lane, as opposed to the very northern end of Dovecote Lane. And you will recall, I'm sure, that this was deferred from the previous meeting to allow members to go and visit the site. And indeed, I went and visited the site last week, and I'm aware that some other members have visited the site as well. So this relates obviously to parking provisions relating to the new development site that's yet to take place at the bottom of Dovecote Lane. And I think Doug Coots, are you presenting this report?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So the purpose of this report, as you've just outlined, is to look at the objections relating to Dovecote Lane area prohibition of waiting in parking places. As you will recall, councillors, this was discussed at the last committee in November and deferred for further review. I just remind everyone that this is linked to a planning permission for 62 new dwellings, which results in realignment of the southern end of Dovecote Lane to create the new access. And these waiting restrictions are linked to that planning consent as such. There were 4 objections originally. 2 of those remained outstanding. One was from Councillor Fall, one from a resident, and these were relating to the reduction in the parking bays outside the public house. The proposal as put forward reduces what is a 6-bay parking area currently down to 4 to allow the safe passage of vehicles and efficient operation of the new access road. Following the deferral at last committee, further work was undertaken to review whether it was possible to look at any further extension to those bays or alternative location as such. Unfortunately, that has not been possible due to the constraints with the bend near where the parking bays are. The Safer Highways team have re-looked at that, and they are concerned about vehicle manoeuvres with the sharp bend and the forward visibility if those 6 bays were to remain. Therefore, the proposal is to revert as previously, to remove those down to 4 bays as previously advertised, and progress the order as per the original advertisement as such.
Right, okay, thanks for that. Yeah, I did have some concerns relating to this because I was under an understanding that all the parking was going to be removed from in front of the Victoria Hotel, but I'm assured that there's those 4 parking places still in place, and therefore the situation isn't as concerning as I initially thought it was, and therefore I will move the recommendation on page 200. And can I have a seconder, please?
Likewise, Chairman, I'm happy to second. Reserve the right to speak.
Thank you very much. And as I already indicated on the previous item, we have the member with us, Councillor Foll, and I did accede to her request that she make some comments. So, Councillor Foll.
Yes, thanks again. Yes, Dovecote Lane's getting a good airing today, isn't it? Just to say that I'm glad some site visits took place. I mean, I did offer to meet people on site, but I'm glad that you went ahead anyway without me. That was great. I'm just really disappointed here, to be honest with you, because I do understand that we've got to be safe, and that potentially could be quite a dangerous bend just around there. I do understand that. I've kind of walked it around there, but I really can't understand why, with a little bit of kind of joint working with Broxtowe Borough Council, why that bend couldn't have just been altered a little bit to actually enable more car parking on the bend, just so as the Vic can actually get more customers. And I know a comment was made last time, we're not here to build car parks for local businesses, but I'm not talking about a car park. We're talking about a handful of cars just to increase the business that's kind of going on in the Vic Hotel. And if you went and walked and looked at the geography of it, I don't think it would have been that hard just to have changed the way that the format of the layout of the road just a little bit. So I just think it's a real shame, to be honest with you. So still, I would say, please don't vote for this. I think it's a really bad idea, but we'll see what other people say.
Okay, yep, thanks for that. And I think partly maybe we're a victim of a sort of combined decisions, both by the Highway Authority and by the Planning Authority, where you bring in different conditions on a planning application in order to facilitate the development. And the development has yet to be started, although they have got harass fencing in place to protect the site, but it hasn't actually started as yet. And on the detailed plan, it does show parking provision in front of the houses that are facing, the new potential houses that are facing onto Dovecote Lane. Doug, I don't know, do you have any comments just to clarify Councillor Fole's comments regarding the alignment of the bend?
In terms of the alignment of the bend, obviously the planning condition looked at the overall layout in terms of the provision of the new access to the housing development. We as such haven't had an input to the actual alignment because that was part of that planning condition. What we've done is looked at what restrictions would be required to make that a safe access. And hence that's the reason why we've reduced the 6 bays down to 4. I completely understand where Councillor Fole's coming from, but and I think the point you made, we've got two things going on here. There's a planning condition, and then there's a need to make sure that the highway operates safely and efficiently.
Right, okay, thanks for that. So any other comments or questions? Councillor Barney.
Yeah, I'm just commenting because I was delighted to also visit the site, and I'd like to say what a lovely place Dovecote Lane is, and indeed the Victoria Hotel. What a magnificent building, and it was so lovely. I felt duty bound to have a pint in there. So,
sorry, you're declaring an interest.
Really is a lovely place. But also, I would comment that the whole of Dovecote Lane, the access isn't great. I mean, it was obviously built in a time when vehicles weren't considered at all, and the railway line was the predominant transport feature there. And that heritage is still prevalent, which is what actually makes the area so lovely. I thought while I was visiting the site that I'd come up with the solution to this. In the mitigation would be 2 extra places at the very southern end alongside the railway line. But then when I came back and read the report and realised the highways officers are saying that's not something we consider on the grounds of safety, I feel like I have to bow to their suggestion, and so my brilliant idea is removed. So that said, it's a shame that these 2 spaces are going to be reduced. I also thought it's a shame that the road wasn't actually positioned somehow in the site. There was plenty of space within the site to position the road in there, but we are where we are. The planning consent, I believe, has been granted. I also think I should just highlight, I was quite concerned to see the Harris fencing that you just alluded to is actually projecting currently a metre into the carriageway, and the building waste is scattered on that metre of highway, which is currently blocking the road. So I think that's something to bring to the highways officers' attention. So all of that said, I have great empathy and sympathy, Kate. I'm delighted to have visited your patch and the lovely Dovecote Road, and I'm sorry where we are, but I think that is where we are. So I think I will be minded to support.
Yep, thanks for that. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry, Kate, but I don't have any solutions either. I just want on record how disappointed I am that we are where we are, and the loss of 2 parking spaces, which will impact an industry which has had a dreadful and terrible few years, and we should be supporting them. I agree with Councillor Barney that, if only the road design, which hasn't been laid yet, which makes this situation even more bonkers, the roads don't exist that are going to eradicate these spaces. So in my head, I'm screaming, surely there's more that we can do to prevent this loss. But sadly, planning permission exists, set out by the district and supported by this authority for the design as is. And if we were to deviate from that, you know, you'd be opening a different can of worms. So I don't know how I'm going to vote. I'm just extremely disappointed and sorry to Victoria Hotel for the impact this will have, and I just want that on record, Chairman.
Yeah, just to bear in mind, we do need to also say that the new houses, there will be some new customers there who will be perfectly within walking distance. So maybe that's the benefit. Maybe the 62 can replace the 2 loss of parking spaces, perhaps. Right, Councillor Gowland.
Just really quickly, I mean, I totally agree with you about the new customers, but it's actually them I'm slightly worried about, because this pub is famous, you know, across the country. People come from a long way, and what we might end up with is people parking in the gardens of or on the, you know, frontages of these new houses because there's not enough parking elsewhere. And I hear what the experts say, and I don't want to, you know, undermine expert opinion, but it does seem really hard to understand how that new dead space that's been created in the corner couldn't have been used somehow for 2 parking bays. But anyhow, as has been said, it seems really a great pity we've ended up here.
Right, okay, so it has been moved and seconded. So all those in favour, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Those against? 2. That's carried. Thank you for that. Item 11. Councillor Wilmot.
I'm sorry. I've just seen this situation, and some years ago I obtained a concessionary.
Sorry, situation on what? What are we talking about?
A conflict of interest.
Oh, right. Oh, sorry. Carry on. Yeah.
I obtained a concessionary travel pass, which I've never used, but I have got one. Does that forbid me from speaking?
As far as I'm aware, I mean, I'm sure that probably most, not all of us, obviously, but most of us. And I'm not asking for exact details, but I'm sure that it's a bit like when you have pensions, etc. You know, lots of people are involved, and when you have allowances, and I think it's a thing where, you know, it's accepted that there are bound to be councillors who have them. But I will just, to be absolutely sure, ask for absolute clarification, and it's fine. So, but thank you for asking anyway. Right, so concessionary travel scheme, and I think we're back to Gary Wood, and there he is, Gary Wood.
Thanks, Councillor Clark. Can I just do a sound check? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, if you stay close to the microphone,
Yep.
then that's fine.
There's obviously a trade-off with being close to the camera, but anyway.
We'll bear it.
Thank you. The purpose of this report is to seek approval to publish the final concessionary travel scheme and the statutory scheme notice on the 3rd of March for the 2022-23 financial year. And approval sought, as in previous years, to delegate that to the service director and chair and vice chair to agree the final arrangements, the reimbursement arrangements with the operators. And some of those arrangements are on a fixed deal and some are on a variable deal in line with government guidance. Those arrangements take into account patronage levels post-COVID, and as I say, the government guidance on the payments to the 23 operators that participate in the scheme. You'll also see in the report that we're seeking permission to consult on the future of the concessions arrangements for the tram, and they are discretionary. And that following that consultation will bring a further report to committee to consider the results of that consultation. And also, whilst that consultation is being undertaken, to approve the current discretionary elements, including the tram concession, the companions pass, and the section 19 minibus entitlements, which total 1.02 million per annum. And the recommendations are as included in the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for that. And as you referred to the recommendations, which I will formally move, recommendation 1 at the bottom of 212 and 2, 3 and 4 at the top of page 213. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you for that. Any comments, Councillor Wilmot?
Thank you very much, Chairman. I welcome this report. I'm fully back plans to continue to support the 153,400 Nottinghamshire pass holders as outlined in paragraph 7 of this report. I further note in paragraph 8 the eligibility criteria for a bus concessionary travel pass on grounds of disability as defined by the government. Public transport can be a lifeline for those who struggle to get out and about. I do note that many of our elderly and disabled residents simply cannot access public transport as it's miles away from where they live. Our major subsidised bus operators simply cherry-pick the most profitable routes. That's why I was pleased to back the £98 million bid by government, to government I should say, to improve bus services. If successful, what impact do you think it will have on total reimbursement of approximately 11.239 million in 21-22 we paid to transport operators for approximately 11 million passengers journeys per annum? As one of the reasons for the bid is to dramatically increase bus travel. It will inevitably lead to a higher subsidy. Also, one of the corporate priorities of the Council is driven by the Armed Forces Covenant. Would the Council agree to a feasibility study into introducing free off-peak travel for armed forces veterans who live in Nottinghamshire? I do have it here, a copy for everyone if they wish them. And it says to add to the recommendations that the Transport and Environment Committee agree to a feasibility study into introducing free off-peak travel for armed force veterans who live in Nottinghamshire. And it's proposed by myself and it's seconded by Tom Hollis. Can I give that a copy to everyone?
That's something that we. It's something that I think we could ask the officers to look at. I think the problem might be, although I might be preempting, and you highlighted paragraph 8 yourself, the eligibility, which is set out in legislation. So I suspect this is more about lobbying government to get the legislation changed rather than us being able to do anything directly ourselves. But I will ask Gary to please clarify if you are aware.
Yeah, so on the first point around the cost of the 11 million, if there is an increase in patronage by those that are eligible under the statutory scheme, then that will be picked up by funding from government directly. The proposition around a pass for those residents who've been members of the armed forces previously, that would have to be picked up by NCC and would be a discretionary element for the County Council to consider.
Right, okay, thanks for that. Councillor Hollis?
So yeah, just to formally add to the recommendations, and I believe it has been written down and formally in line with our constitution, that we add a fifth recommendation, just to reread it to members, which can be circulated, that the Transport and Environment Committee agree to a feasibility study into introducing free off-peak travel for armed service veterans who live in Nottinghamshire. And I'd formally second that. But I'd also like clarity on point agenda item 2, where it describes chairman and vice chairman of the committee. Is that vote both vice chairman or a particular one? I know with having 2, it's always a little bit unclear.
My understanding is that is the vice chairman that has speciality on transport.
Possibly might be worth making that clearer in the report for members of the public in future as well. Then. But
Right,
yeah,
okay.
formally. Noel, are you happy for us to circulate this?
Have we got the?
We've got it just here. Yeah.
Have we got it?
We haven't got
No.
it. They're about. Councillor Wilmot proposing to hand it to us.
Noel, have you already had sight of this? Right, okay, I think if the live stream, can we just adjourn the meeting just for, well, I was going to say 5 minutes, but probably not even 5 minutes, but a maximum of 5 minutes, just because we haven't seen sight of this before, so just to clarify. So if we could just adjourn the meeting and stop the live stream just for 5 minutes. Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry for that short recess. Just wanted to check the recommendation as we hadn't seen it before. And as mover of the recommendations, I'm happy to include this as an additional to the recommendations. Bear in mind it is a feasibility study, so we can look at those, literally those feasibilities. So as mover, I'm happy to include that as an additional recommendation. If my seconder is in agreement with that. Can you put your microphone? Can you put your microphone on, please?
Yeah, it's a feasibility, and it seems sensible. So I'm of a mind to support it and second it. Chair.
Right. Okay. So that's added into the, and so thank you for highlighting that. So that feasibility study can be included. So any further comments? Sorry, Councillor Guilfoyle.
Chairman, we've got no problem with supporting the feasibility study. The only concern I do have about the paper in total is obviously the consideration that is implicated in here in the withdrawal of the current subsidy that's given to the 60,000 county residents who use the tram, thereby saving somewhere in the region of £1.1 million. I think that will be a retrograde step, and I think you've got to put everything, if you're looking at that, you've got to put everything into the mix, because clearly there is a cost. As has been said earlier, Councillor Hollis was quite right at pointing out there's a cost to certain things. There is a cost to this, because this again will be a discretionary issue for members to consider, and I'm personally not happy that we're considering cutting the or looking at the reducing the subsidy that's already there for the people to use the tram for county residents. So with that, we would obviously support this additional recommendation, but do air concerns about reviewing the concession for the tram.
Yeah, I'll just make a comment that, I mean, all these things need to be looked at some time or another, and just to emphasise that there's a public consultation which will take place, and so it depends on what that public consultation, what the results of that are, what that bears, whether anything further is looked at. So, we are where we are at the moment, and it's a question of having a public consultation in order to assess it. Councillor Gowland.
I'm sorry, Councillor, could you use your microphone, please?
Could you switch your microphone off, please?
Sorry, I'm going to have to ask you to start again.
Okay, sorry. All right. So clearly the trams are probably affecting my residents more than most. But I know that Councillor Guilfoyle felt the same way, and it doesn't affect his residents. We want an integrated transport system, and if we have to have people considering which way to go, they just won't use public transport. The system is designed to be integrated, so having part of it available to people, not other parts, is just silly. So I really hope that isn't considered in long term. As has been said, this will have costs. It's a good idea, but I wonder if we might also consider NHS staff, because we know the parking problems around the hospitals. If you could encourage some NHS staff to maybe not use their cars to get to work, but use public transport, that might also help with parking. Thank you.
Thanks. Well, maybe that can be considered along with the public consultation. Right. Any other? Sorry, Councillor Hollis.
Yeah, just some brief points really on Councillor Guilfoyle's points. I mean, obviously, I welcome the fact that it's been included, the independent recommendation. But I think the tram is a big one, and Councillor Gowland said something very controversial in Councillor Wilmot's book. You'll be aware that the whole of the Nottinghamshire tram network originates in Councillor Wilmot's division, with the central hub starting and finishing in Hucknall. I think he'd remind me of saying, but we want to be encouraging people to use public transport, whether it buses, but particularly trams, which is, of course, is a lot better for the environment. And I think any step that kind of puts people off or provides extra obstacles isn't welcome, particularly bearing in mind the tram network will only expand and expand and expand during this lifetime of this council and our lifetimes as well, whether it be in Ashfield or other parts of the county, particularly Beeston, etc. But then just to turn a few of the comments onto the bus services, when I first became a county councillor back in 2013, bus subsidies was hot on the agenda for cutting. We used to have a 15-minute, half-an-hour service in much of my division, particularly north parts like Huthwaite and Carsick Estates. But Councillor Smith's division, Helen Smith, in Stanton Hill and Skegby used to get a regular service. Now they get nothing on a Sunday, and at best it's an hourly service. The bus companies don't provide it because, of course, it's not profitable. And when I think we should really try and encourage them not just to take our subsidies, but actually to start up routes which gets people off cars, gets people on the lower income spectrum to school, work, college, whatever it might be, which only betters people. And I'm sure, like other councillors, we get a report, and consistently places like Ashfield and Mansfield are at the bottom of the income spectrum, and often one of the biggest inhabitants is not being able to get places. And of course, it doesn't help people's personal lives, but also doesn't help the economy. So anything we can do to help people travel and link it into the other reports that we have, and I think this committee is probably well designed actually, and the fact that the environment and transport do heavily link. And in one hand, we're employing extra staff, and then in the other hand, we're stopping people using one of the most environmentally friendly forms of transport. So, you know, we do need to link it up and actually share sort of shared vision and direction. And it goes back to some of the conversations I had before. You know, we can't just do symbolic gestures. Let's look at the whole thing and start doing things a bit more logically. But I welcome the fact that we've got a fifth recommendation, and I look forward to the results of the feasibility study. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Right, so the recommendations have been moved and seconded with the addition of the fifth recommendation to be added on. All those in favour, please. That's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. Item 12, the work programme. I don't know, is this you, Adrian? And anybody have any comments on the work programme? Councillor Hollis?
I'm going to go for third time luck here, Mr. Chairman. I'm looking for the out-of-hours service. I mentioned it 2 meetings ago. Where is it?
Next page, Tom.
Go on, have I missed it? Whoa.
Items to be scheduled. The very last page, the back page.
What we need to do, we want the time allocating. Why haven't we got a time? We've got meet. So what we're saying is we're not going to be discussing the out-of-hours service till after July.
No, it doesn't say that. It
So
says
why isn't it
to
on
be
the-
scheduled.
So why haven't we got a time and date for it yet?
Well, because it may be, again,
So it
maybe
might be in
appropriate
2
to have it
years.
on another one.
Or just, when's the time scale?
We'll dip into our pool of capacity
Not the
and try
carpool,
and bring
we're
it forward as soon as we can
Yeah, that's-
with the chairman's support. Thank you.
There's loads of space in 27th of July. Oh, there won't be. It'll be full of independents. It's okay.
Right. Okay. Well, it's anyway. It'll be there at some stage. Councillor Gowland.
Sorry, I was actually going to raise the same matter and then I'd found mine at the bottom before you. But can I ask also 2 things? One is school zones, school travel zones.
So I misheard that.
School travel zones, we've talked about it in the past. I wonder if we could add that to the work programme. But more to the point, Mr Chairman, I'm not sure where to bring up this issue of the gates at the football ground. It's a really serious issue for the residents. It's absolutely shocking situation. I don't know how to bring it up. Maybe this isn't the time, but can you advise me, please?
Yeah. Well, as you know, we have exchanged correspondence on it, and I do appreciate that it is an issue very much for the locals. I don't know if whether you're.
Yeah, just to confirm, Councillor Garland, I've flagged it with Gary Wood. We're going to look into that, and we'll reach out to you following the discussion we had a couple of days ago.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Lovely. So, I haven't moved the. I'm moving that the work programme be agreed. Seconder. All those in favour? Is it unanimous?
We haven't put it on the schedule. Not yet.
All right. So it's 9 in favour. Right. Okay. Thank you very much indeed for your attendance. I declare the meeting closed, and the live stream will be stopped. Thanks.